Hi everyone, it's Nicole and I'm back with my mini album where I record all of my books that I'm going to read in 2019. Now last year I had used a little book to write down the book 1, book 2, book 3, and this year I wanted to change it a little bit. So I have this stamp set from Carpe Diem and it's a little coffee mug. And I like where the band is in the center, and that's where I'm going to put the numbers of the book number. Since I had the stamp set out and my ink, I am just going to cover that page full of those little coffee mugs, and then that way I'll have enough for almost all the year. That is one less thing that I'm going to have to do every month is take that stamp set out and stamp a whole bunch of coffee mugs for the books that I read. So this month I read 8 books, so I'm going to cut out 8 little coffee mugs and I'm going to fussy cut them. The way I do these is I do everything in batches. I did find these cards that I had gotten from one of the kits from years ago, and it's all stuff about books, and I thought that would be a great way to start my album. So I'm going to put the year 2019, and I did decide to just do a 6x8 album again. It fit 120 books last year, so I don't think I'm going to read that many books this year. I mean, you never know, but I decided to just go with the small album, and it's really easy to fill out that way. I decided to grab a Project Life card kit from Becky Higgins, and I think it's called Favorites. And that's another thing I do. I don't go between different Project Life kit. I pick one kit per month, and then I just change the kit every month, and then that way every month is different. Then I went into my stash and I found these little stamps, and that's what I'm going to use all year to write the numbers on those little coffee cups, and they almost look like a typed little letter. I really like them, and I think they're from Tailored something or other. I've had this stamp set forever, so I'm just changing the color of ink, and the inks that I'm using are from Hero Arts, and I have those right next to my desk and I use them quite a bit. So one thing that I found that really works for me is to do everything in batches. So I stamped all the coffee cups and then I did all the numbers. Now I'm going to figure out which books I started with at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to put the numbers on the books right away. I like that the album actually has the books in the order that I finished them. I think it's really interesting to see, which book I read first at the very beginning of the year and then which book I finished the year with. Now, once I have all the numbers on the photos, then I grabbed a 4x6 card and I'm just going to write on it January, and then I'm going to put TBR somewhere else on the card. And then I'm going to write down all the books that I wanted to read in January. Now, whether or not I read them all, that's a different story. But those are all the books at the beginning of the month. What I like to do is, I pick way more books than I know that I can read. So normally I read between 10 and 14 books in a month. And so I'll pick like 12 or 13. And January was no different. I think I picked 11 and I ended up reading 9, and I started a 10th one, and then I think I'm 70% in a book that I actually started in December. So I write all the books, and then I'm going to put a little box at the end, and if I've read it, I'll put an X through it, and if I started but didn't finish it, I'll just put like a half an X, so then I'll know that I started that book in that month, but not necessarily finished it in that month. Now the next step is I go through the Project Life cards that I chose, and I see which one really goes well with the pictures that I printed. Now how I printed my picture is I go on my Pick Frame app. I think it's the second frame. There's 2 pictures on one, and I choose the ratio 4:3, and then I just print my pictures that way. Now, how do I get the picture of each book is how I go on Goodreads. I click on the picture, take a picture of my screen, and then that way I have a picture of each book. I didn't change too much about how I did it last year because I really liked how it worked out. And that way I know that that's one sort of project that I can get done on a monthly basis, and I know exactly what I need to do. And on the very last day of the month, I print the photos right away, and I'm going to, do it right away. And then that way at the end of the year, I have all the books that I read in this one little mini album. Once I have all the pictures on, then I move on to putting embellishments on the card where I'm going to do the writing. Once the embellishments are on, then I take out my 5-star rating stamp and I stamp it on each card where I'm going to do the journaling, and then I take some markers and color in the stars. Then once that is done, then I go and I do the journaling for all the cards. So I really do everything, every step in batches. And I found that instead of taking 3 hours to get the month done, now I have it down to about 45 minutes to an hour. And I make sure that I do the journaling on each of the book right away. So a little synopsis of each book that I've read. I do it right away because otherwise it's going to end up being the same way as my scrapbook layouts, that I have tons of layouts that are not the journaling is not done. Okay, so while I'm doing the process of putting all that together, let's talk a little bit about the books that I read this month, January. So the first book I read was After I Do by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and you've heard me say that quite a few times. She's quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. And this was like the third book I read from her. And this is about a couple that got married, and they've been married for 10 years, and they fell out of love. They fight all the time, and they just don't connect anymore. So they decide to take a break for a year. So the book is about a dual timeline. So you read the story about how they fell in love, and then you read the story of them now. And it was a 5-star read for me. I absolutely loved it. I think every Taylor Jenkins Reid's book is going to be a 5-star for me. Absolutely love them. If you haven't given her a try, I highly recommend. She has a way of doing these contemporary romance, but they're hard-hitting, and they're just amazing. The next book I read was The Chaos of Standing Still, and it's by Jessica Brody. And that was an okay read. It was a 3-star for me. It is about New Year's Eve, and they get stuck at an airport due to a big storm. And it's a hard-hitting contemporary romance, and she's dealing with the death of her friend that happened exactly a year before. So she ends up meeting a boy and some new friends and all the shenanigans that they get into while they're snowed in. Like I said, it was an okay read. I gave it 3 stars. It wasn't anything like mind-blowing or anything like that. I enjoyed reading it. Okay, so the next book I read was The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. And I had bought her second book, The Proposal, and I had the first book on Kindle. And I have this thing about reading books in the order that the author wrote them. Anyway, it's a good thing I did, because to me, The Wedding Date, The Proposal, and then the next one is The Wedding Party, I believe. As far as I'm concerned, they should be read in the order that they were written, because they're companion. But to me, they're almost like a series, because it's dealing with the same characters. They go in each story. So to me, you should read them in that order, because you're going to get spoiled for the first one. But anyway, The Wedding Date is about a girl and a guy that get stuck in an elevator. And while they're there, they kind of talk, and then he kind of mentions that he's going to his ex-wedding, and she's now marrying his best friend, and it's really awkward. And by the end that they are stuck in the elevator, he's asked her to join him as his date to go to the wedding. And then their romance goes from there. It was super cute. I gave it 4-star, really liked it. Now, the next book I read was Kingdom of Ash, which is the last book in the Kingdom of Ash series, the Throne of Glass series. And this book was 989 pages. So that's why I only have 8 books read this month, because that was a chunker. And I finished it. I gave it 5 stars. I cried during that book. It was a nice conclusion. Like, she didn't skim over some stuff. Like, there is, you have closure on all the things. Now, I know there's another book coming in September, and it's more like a book where it has all the world and the terminology and all that stuff. But apparently there is an excerpt of like 10 years later and what happened to our favorite characters. So I'm going to be purchasing that one for sure and reading it. So 5 stars. The next book is the first in a duology. It's called Letters to the Lost by Bridget Kemmerer. Oh my goodness, I love that book. It was a 5 stars, and it is about a girl that her mom died maybe almost a year before, and she still goes to her grave site and writes letters to her, like physical letters. And then a boy picks up the letter and writes on it, like kind of answering to what she says. And they start communicating that way. And it was so good. I love the book. 5 stars. The next book is book 2, The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory. And this follows a different character in this book, and it's Carl. And the girl, she gets a proposal at a baseball field, in front of everybody, and she turns it down, and the story goes from there. Now, the next book is Given to the Earth, which is the second book in the Given to the Sea duology. Now, the first book was just okay for me. It was okay. Now, the second one, I loved it even more. It ripped my heart. I absolutely loved it. And the last book that I read was The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. And that was another 5-star read for me. It is about a princess who, her father says that she has to marry this prince to make an alliance between their 2 countries. And the day of the wedding, she runs away. And 2 people follow her. One, there's the prince that she was supposed to marry, and the other is the assassin. And for a big part of the book, you don't know which one is who, which one is the assassin and which one is the prince. And I absolutely love this book. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I already have the other 2 books, and I'm going to be keep going in that series. So this month, just to recap, I started Queen of Air and Shadows by Cassandra Clare. I'm about halfway through the book, and that's another one that's about 860 pages. So I, went through one big book and then half of another one. I wanted to read books that were over 500 pages, which I started 2 this year. I wanted to finish 15 series, which this month I finished Kingdom of Ash, that finished a series, and I finished Given to the Earth, which was also finishing a series. I wanted to start 20 new series, which The Wedding Date, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, that is a series because the characters keep popping in the other books. So that's one series that I started. I also started the duology Letters to the Lost. And I started The Kiss of Deception, so I started 3 series, finished 2, and then I started another book that's going to finish a series, which is Queen of Air and Darkness, and I'm halfway through. And I wanted to read, I think, 5 new authors this year, which Jessica Brody, she's a new author to me. Jasmine Guillory is a new author to me. Bridget Kemmerer is also a new author to me. So I've already read 3 new authors. So I would say that as far as my goals, they're coming along really good. And that's it. That's going to complete this January wrap up. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit subscribe. If you're enjoying these videos, if you wouldn't mind, give me a thumbs up and leave me a comment down below. And I want to thank you so much for watching. Bye.